This is not a fairy tale. It is concrete, steel, sweat, and vision. Tonight we will walk through 10 mega projects that shook the West and gave birth to a new Burkina Faso. A Burkina that says clearly, our sovereignty is not negotiable. So stay with us, because this isn't just another story. It's the future that Sankara once dreamed. And it is happening before our eyes. Say it with me, Africa bows to no one. If your heart beats in 2024, the skies above Ouagadougou lit up with more than the sun. After 6 long months of silence, Air Burkina lifted off once again, carrying with it not only passengers but a nation's pride. The new Embraer E190, acquired without foreign loans, symbolized a break from dependency, a declaration that Burkina wings would no longer be clipped. It was more than a flight, it was sovereignty in motion, a country rising above decades of humiliation. But this was just the beginning. If Burkina Faso could reclaim the skies, what would it reclaim next? When the Embraer E190 of Air Burkina roared into the sky, it was more than an aircraft piercing through clouds. It was history tearing through the ceiling of doubt. The West had grown comfortable seeing Burkina Faso as grounded, dependent, invisible, and yet here was a country with barely 22 million people, not only putting its airline back in the air, but doing so on its own terms, without the IMF, without World Bank dictates, without colonial fingerprints. The symbolism stung. Because flight is not prestige, flight is power. It connects markets, accelerates trade, and for a landlocked nation, it means the difference between survival and suffocation. But Traoré did not stop at a single plane. In Bobo Dioulasso, the country's second city, bulldozers tore through red earth to give birth to an 80 billion CFA airport modernization. Sleek terminals, wide runways, global standards where once stood dust and silence. And northeast of the capital, a project long stalled under foreign hands suddenly surged forward. The Ouagadougou-Doncine International Airport, a 3.5-kilometer runway, a 1 million passenger terminal. And most shocking of all, a 25-megawatt solar power station to guarantee energy independence in a region where one blackout could paralyze entire communities. To the west, these were supposed to be dreams too big for a small African state. But under Traoré, they were not dreams. They were blueprints turned real. And as the skies opened, the soil answered. In early 2024, tractors replaced rifles in what Traoré himself called the agro-pastoral offensive. 78 billion CFA francs poured into fields. Not war chests, 400 tractors, hundreds of motor pumps, thousands of tons of seed and fertilizer. For the first time in living memory, small farmers were given tools, not excuses. Each student in agricultural training received not just theory, but 2 hectares of land. 20,000 young Burkina enrolled, not as job seekers, but as food producers, heirs of a sovereign food economy. Where once families waited for foreign aid ships, they now saw their children drive tractors across ancestral land. The reaction was visceral. Farmers cried as they received their first state-backed equipment. Women's cooperatives, long sidelined, suddenly found themselves processing cashews and tomatoes in factories funded not by outsiders, but by local investors. From village elders pooling savings to diaspora sending remittances, a cashew plant employing tens of thousands, a tomato factory in Bobo processing 100 tons daily. These were not minor shifts. They were revolutions in dignity. And for every worker hired, every farmer paid fairly. Another chain of dependency snapped. But with progress came anger from those who once profited from Burkina's weakness. Western analysts warned of reckless overreach. French commentators muttered about unsustainable populism. American think tanks questioned whether Chinese and Russian partnerships were mortgaging the country's future. Yet on the streets of Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, people chanted a different story. They saw the rebirth of Thomas Sankora's dream. They saw a new generation saying, "We will not beg for food. We will grow it. We will not sell our gold for scraps. We will refine it. We will not watch planes fly overhead. We will pilot them." Finance, long a fortress of elites, was breached with the creation of the Postbank. With 15 billion CFA in capital, it opened doors to farmers who could finally get credit for seeds, to women who could finance tailoring workshops, to students who could save for their studies. For once, banking was not for skyscrapers in Paris, but for huts and homes across Burkina. The symbolism was devastating to Western narratives. Sovereignty was no longer an abstract slogan. It was a savings account in the name of a farmer who had been ignored for generations. And in health, too, the changes struck deep. A geriatric hospital, the first of its kind, rose in Bobo Dioulasso, honoring elders long abandoned. 95,000 retirees gained free checkups and medicine, recognition that dignity does not end with retirement. A 500-bed hospital in Palau, built in partnership with China, began offering surgeries once thought impossible in Burkina Faso. For a nation whose life expectancy had ranked among the lowest in the world, these were not small steps, they were lifelines. The West was rattled because these projects carried a dangerous message. Africa does not need permission to build, and dignity cannot be imported. While analysts debated GDP ratios, Burkinabe youth were enrolling in training programs, elders were receiving medicine, and women were cashing their first independent paychecks. And as Traoré spoke at international forums, his words carried the weight of bulldozers moving, factories humming, and planes lifting. This was no longer rhetoric, it was proof. But proof has consequences. With every airport inaugurated, every seed planted, every factory opened, the question grew louder. How long would powers threatened by this example allow it to continue? Could a small country sustain such a bold defiance without triggering the wrath of those who have always profited from its dependence? For decades, Burkina Faso's riches flowed outward like a river that never watered its own soil. Gold mines dug deep by foreign companies shipped raw ore abroad, leaving behind little more than dust, poverty, and environmental scars. To many in the West, this was business as usual. But in late 2024, something extraordinary happened. The government, under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, nationalized two of the largest gold mines, Bangu and Wagnan, at a cost of roughly $80 million. Suddenly, profits that once padded foreign accounts began to flow into schools, hospitals, and national infrastructure. It was a startling revelation. Burkina Faso was no longer content to be the supplier of raw materials. It demanded to be the master of its own wealth. The proof came quickly. A fourth domestic gold refinery, built in partnership with Marina Gold, opened its doors with the capacity to process 150 tons of gold annually. For the first time, Burkinabe hands transformed ore into refined gold bars without exporting value abroad. The sight of molten gold pouring into molds within Burkina's own borders carried an electric symbolism. This was not just economics, it was justice. Justice for the miners who had labored for pennies, justice for the farmers whose land was scarred by extraction, justice for the nation that had been told it was too poor, too small, too dependent to own its destiny. And the gold was only the beginning.